Hi folks, I'm here with your Pro Tools Exercise 10 video tutorial, which is for automation and mixdown. And you might have thought that in the course of this curriculum that you had finally escaped the low roar session that this textbook has used for 2 exercises, but unfortunately it has one last appearance, kind of like a horror movie villain. It just keeps coming back. So in this case, we need to go ahead and give a title to our additional copy of Low Roar. This is now the 3rd time we're working on this session. And the first thing that we're going to do after we do that is we are going to be making sure that we are looking in the edit window and that we are looking at the volume automation, because we're going to set some automation breakpoints. The textbook says to make sure that you are in the edit window, and right in the beginning, I believe this session defaults to the mix window, so you might have to go to your edit window view, which you can always do with command equals. And they want you to make sure that you have a couple parameters set correctly. So number 1, be in the edit window. Number 2, make sure that all of your tracks are in auto read mode. The way you can tell what automation mode a track is in is underneath the track view selector. Here we have our automation mode selector. And I will give you a heads up, most of the time in Pro Tools it is set to read, but if for some reason it isn't, you just need to click it and you can change it. If you need to change all of them for some reason, if you hold the Option key, we could, for example, set all of these to off. But in this case, what we actually want to do is set all of these to read so that all of these can be automation read mode. We want to make sure that we're showing the volume automation playlists, which will come up because these are subfolders. You can do that by doing the track view selector here. Some are set up as, could be any of these parameters, and I believe this session defaults to volume, but if it's not, just make sure all of these are saying volume on them. On a normal audio track, they would say waveform, but on these sub routing folders, they're gonna say volume. The other thing you want to make sure that you are in is loop playback mode. And you can always make sure you're in loop playback mode by the play button with the loop going around it. If for some reason it's not, you can always right click it or control click it to turn off loop playback mode, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, which is Command Shift and L. And Command Shift and L, you can see when I do that keyboard shortcut, Command Shift L, loop playback comes on and off accordingly, which is a really useful one to have. You also want to make sure that you are in absolute grid mode. So I'm going to press my F4 key to go to grid mode. Purple is relative grid, blue make sure that you are in absolute grid mode. And they also want you to make sure that you have a grid value of 1 bar. And my grid value is going to be up here in the top of my edit window. And you want to make sure A, that your grid is on and that you have it set to 1 bar. Most of these parameters should be set up as soon as you open the session. It was when I opened it up, but if for some reason it's not, it's always good to make sure that that matches. To make the workflow a bit easier, we're going to start off by placing a single automation breakpoint at each song section. And using the grabber tool, we are going to place a single automation breakpoint on each track except the main monitor, your master fader, at the following locations. So on bar 9, for example. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the beginning of my session. I'm actually going to get rid of, for now, the just for me, the minutes and seconds. I just want to see bars and beats. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can make this session a little bit easier to see. And I can see that bar 9 is right here. Because I have a grid value of 1 bar and I'm in absolute grid mode, if I go to place a breakpoint, even if I click slightly off of the grid, it has to go to it, which is why they want you with a grid value of 1 bar, and also why they want you to be in absolute grid mode. That's going to help you so you don't have to click perfectly, you just have to get close, and for this exercise, that's very helpful. And once we've done that, we're going to continue to follow the directions by putting an automation breakpoint on every track except the main monitor at bar 9. So I can tell that I'm at bar 9. And then what we're going to do is place an automation breakpoint on each track except the main monitor at bar 9. So bar 9 is over here, and I'm clicking on each track on the volume automation and getting a breakpoint set for all of them at bar 9. It's a little hard to see on my screen, so you might need to zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. And bar 9 is moved a little for me. Bar 9 is over here. And we're clicking these in because we're in the grabber tool, and we're not doing the master fader or main monitor track at the very end. We also need to add another breakpoint at bar 31. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll over to bar 31. And I'm going to do the same exact process starting at the top of my session at bar 31. Next, I'm going to do the same thing at bar 47. So I'm scrolling over here to bar 47. Going to do the same thing from the top of my session. And then I need to do the same thing again at bar 71. And then I need to do the same thing again at bar 87. Doing the same thing again at bar 91. And then once again, putting another automation breakpoint at bar 115. And then the last one is happening at bar 137. Then the textbook asks you to make a selection around the introductory section of the song, which covers from the beginning of the session's timeline to bar 9. Select this area and make sure that the selected area is also on each of the tracks. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to the beginning of our session and we're going to make a selection in our section from the beginning through bar 9. And once we've done this, they want us to begin playback. I'm going to make sure that I am in looped playback with that Command-Shift-L keyboard shortcut. And using the trim tool, they want us to adjust the volume levels of the individual tracks to suit your musical tastes. At this point, don't make any changes to the main monitor. And because that we have added these breakpoints, there's a great tip that happens on page 351. Because there are automation breakpoints at the beginning and end of your selections, you will find that dragging up or down with the trim tool will result in the overall level of the selection section changing without affecting other parts of the track. So let me show you what they mean by this. If I move, for example, just the breakpoints on this section, you'll notice it's not moving it in the normal kind of linear left to right or right to left, up or down mode. Because I have these multiple breakpoints, it brings up this bracket function, which is really useful when you're mixing, and it's moving the whole section. So now when I zoom out, it's a little easier to see if I show you basically the whole section. If you look at just that section, the breakpoint for it is kind of happening consistently across that section. You can see that, for example, on the Vox sub, I have it set to negative 22.4 dB, and then as soon as it gets to bar 9, it jumps to negative 6. All right, now you probably wouldn't want your vocals that low, but just to give you an idea. And I can do the same thing on this one, for example. I can move it up, and because we did all this tedious work of adding these breakpoints, we can make these kind of uniform movements across a section. And this is really useful when you're mixing different sections. And what I'm not going to do in this video is go through the entire mixing process, but if you follow the directions that they give you, they really want you to mix each section that they've delineated. So the first one would be from the beginning to bar 9. The second section would be from bar 9 to 31, and they've labeled that as the first verse. The third section would be from bar 31 to bar 47. They've labeled that as the first chorus. Bar 47 to 71 is the second verse. Bar 87 to 91 is the break. 91 to 115 is another break. And then 115 to 137 is the ending. So you're going to mix each of those sections, and each of those sections, because they function different musically, should have different mix levels. And here for this, I've just kind of haphazardly done this, or I've just kind of moved them to show you how these volume automation levels should behave if you've done the breakpoints correctly. But as you go through the session, you should listen to it, and each section should have its own mix. The chorus should have a different identity from the verse, and the break should have a different identity in terms of levels and dynamics and mix from the other sections as well. Part 3 of this exercise is called Tweaking with Tools, and they want you to use the edit tools to make smaller changes within the sections. By this point, your mix is becoming more uniquely yours, so the directions here will need to be less specific. So by now, each of your sections, you should have adjusted using those volume automation breakpoints to have a different static mix. And now we're going to make this mix less static and more dynamic by making smaller and more intricate and detailed changes to the volume automation. They want you to still continue to use the trim tool where you would take an automation breakpoint and maybe you're still going to make some minute changes, but they want you to branch out into using the pencil and the grabber tools. The pencil tool is really, really helpful. I really like the freehand one. So for example, I'll just use this as a small example of what you might do. There's this really cool sound effect that happens at bar 31. You'll hear it's going to come in on its own right here, this cool sound effect. And maybe you want that to come in rather quickly, a real quick rise and then a quick decay. And yes, you could go ahead and put in all of the automation breakpoints, but what if you could just draw in what you want to happen, which is what I'm going to do. So I drew in, it has a quick rise and it's going to come down, and then you can hear the difference on it. Okay, and that's just an example of if you wanted to do something a little more nuanced. You don't have to put in every single automation breakpoint. You can just go to your pencil tool, even if you're doing something as simple as a line, right? It has a really useful feature for putting in a line, and then it kind of goes back to the other parts. So if you want something a little more linear, I don't know if in this mix you would necessarily use random or square or triangle, but they are available. And then parabolic definitely could be helpful to use at some point. So I recommend that you take a look at those and see if you can incorporate them into part 3. Part 4 of the exercise is creating a fade out, and it says that our main monitor track is a master fader that is controlling the total output of our mix. That means that it's an easy place to create a fade out for the mix. They want us to be in the grabber tool, which you can always get to from F8 on your keyboard. They want us to go to bar 123 and put a single volume automation breakpoint. And up until this point, you should not have done any automation breakpoints on the main fader. So I'm going to go to bar 123, and I'm going to get there rather quickly by hitting the asterisk button on my numeric keypad, which brings me to the main counter. I can simply type bar 123, and then on my numeric keypad or keyboard, I can hit the enter button. And now my session goes right to bar 123. I'm still in a grid mode, so I should be able to click rather easily at bar 123. I'm going to put a single automation breakpoint, and then they also want another one at bar 130, which if I go to bar 130 again, I can see that bar 130 is over here. Zoom in a little bit more so I can actually see here is bar 130, putting that other single volume automation breakpoint. What they want us then to do is drag the automation breakpoint at 130 down to the bottom of the track so it goes to negative infinity dB. And by doing so, we're making a fade out. So now you can see the fade out goes from 123 all the way to bar 130. So it's quite a long fade out. Part 5 of the exercise is exporting your mix. To end the exercise and this course, the 101 Fundamentals textbook, you'll export your mix in the Red Book audio format. So first we need to make a selection. We're going to select from the beginning of the session's timeline until 130, which is where our fade out ends. The easiest way to make the selection for this is to actually use your numeric keypad. So using your numeric keypad, you're going to go to hit the slash button, which is at the top of the numeric keypad, right underneath those function keys. And you're going to let it be a value of 1 for your start. And you're going to see that this highlights right away once we start making some selections. So once again, I'm going to my numeric keypad, hitting the slash button, going to a value of 1. And then I need to make an end selection value. So I hit the slash button again, and this time I'm going to do a value of 130 because we want the selection to end at 130. And the only other thing I need to do to finalize the selection is to hit the enter button on my numeric keypad. And that's now I've selected the exact numbers that they did, and I didn't have to do it with a lot of clicking around in my session. I just had to type it into the numeric keypad. So that can be a real time saver for your session. Then they want you to go to File, Bounce Mix. So that's what we're going to go to next. Going to File, and we are going to Bounce Mix, which you can also do with Option Command B. You either go to it from the File menu or simply hold Option, Command, and B. And that brings us to the Bounce Mix dialog. They want you to choose WAV file as your export file type. The mix source should be the output path attached to our speakers. So for me, it was the physical output that I had here. File format should be interleaved. I'll zoom in here so you can see it a little bit better. The bit depth should be 16 bits. Sample rate should be 44.1 kilohertz. Pad to frame boundary should be unchecked. Import after bounce, also unchecked. File destination is going to be in our bounce files folder. Offline, you want checked. I will warn you, because you're choosing your bounced files folder, you need to know where your session folder is. It's going to send it to your session folder, and it's going to create a folder called bounced files. So just make sure you know where you opened the session from. If you're a little unsure, you could also go to your directory and then you could choose. Some people like to bounce their files to a desktop. Some people keep a separate bounced files folder for all of their Pro Tools sessions. But either way, just be aware of where you are sending it. If you follow the directions and use session folder, it's going to go to your bounced files folder in your session folder. If you want to go somewhere else, just be mindful of that when you choose it in the directory. And then they tell you once you've finished with it, you want to locate the file and preview it in any application. So you could double click it and open it on your Mac and ensure that it has been correctly exported. Part 6 of the exercise is archiving your mix. So what they want us to do is do a file, save, copy in. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Save, Session, Copy in. And we're going to call it Format. We're going to use Session, Latest. Audio type, they also want WAV files. 44.1 kilohertz, so I have to change that here. The bit depth set to 16 bits. Interleaved should be checked. Limit character set should be unchecked, which it is. And items to copy should be audio files. They want us to name the session Low Roar, Your Name, Today's Date, Archived Copy. So I believe once I hit OK, I get the opportunity here to do it. So we're going to get rid of the title that says copy, and we're just going to rename it so it says Lesson 10, Low Roar, Our Name, Today's Date, and then Archived Copy. So we're going to add that as a suffix at the end of it. So we're going to add Archived Copy to the end of this file. And then we need to choose a location. I'm going to let it go into the Lesson 10 session folder that I had. And it's going to go ahead and process that, and that's going to complete the exercise. I hope you found this video helpful, and I really recommend that you take your time with the mix part of the video where you go through and mix the different stems and subfolders together and really find a mix that works for you and enjoy mixing a really cool, well-recorded song. Hope this video was helpful.